On the Cut. Reflections on life, work and trade on some of the main canals of England in earlier years of the century. Despite competition from railways and roads, the canals continued to play a part in heavy transport well after World War II. As well as the larger companies owning sizable carrying fleets, there were also individual families in the north, the Midlands and the south who traded for themselves with one or two boats.
If you were a boatman or came from a boating family, you had no trouble in getting a job, you know. Everybody knew one another. Even the managers of the companies, they knew the children, they knew the parents, they knew everybody. You had no trouble in getting a job.
At 13 or 14, there's nobody with us, only just me and my brother, my own boat, my own horse, and running to Marple, and it was left to us then. Now we handled the locks, what we done, and everything else. Now we handle people, even to the horse. You're left fully in charge of all that.
I had a horse boat, started captain in 1933 for Fuzz Morton's, and had that up to 1935, and had a motor, the Perch. And I kept that one till 1947, and had another new one, the Clee. I was on the work front for about, for the waterways and Fuzz Morton, about 60 odd year.
How did Fellows and Morton come to take you on?
From my father. His father and his father before him, they were on the Fuzz Morton, you see. And they always shot the sons on. Had to keep on, because you brought up on the boats, and you're always used to being used to the water. And they always shot them. They never shot anybody up the town, because they couldn't boat, you see.
It was up to you. You use your own judgment and try to persevere to think yourself which was the best possibility to get your own freight and your own craft, you see. Well, there used to be a firm of Lees and Atkins at Poles, you see. You could hire about there for 10 shillings a week. And then it was up to you to go and get yourself a horse and get yourself a little contract. Be independent of everybody else. There was very little work about. So if you could try and get over a person who was something to do with the canal, like Lees and Atkins, they would be the people that would advise you to go to Mr. So-and-so and so-and-so and see if you could get a contract. If you couldn't, go to somebody else. And then eventually you would get a little contract, say of 25 tons per month. And then if you was all right and you're doing your job, as you travelled along these various factories, a boatman had always got the idea to go and ask people. They wasn't educated, nothing, but there was one ambition to try and get work to keep himself contented to make a living, you see. Well, he used to go by various factories and he used to say, I'm going to pop round there, see if he wants a load of coal, or a load of bricks, a load of sand, anything like that. You see, you hired this boat for 10 shillings a week, and if you could come back with a freight or something else, all right, it'd probably be 18 pence per ton. But instead of coming back light and getting nothing, to travel 2 days with no pay or nothing, that little 18 pence a ton, if it was only 10 ton, it was 15 shillings.
On a boat in them days, you hadn't got time to take your time. You couldn't get through a lock, you couldn't get along the cut fast enough. The faster you went, the faster somebody else wants to go.
Time was, of course, money.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It was cut one another's throat for a loaf of bread. The more boats you could travel past, if they tied you, got bad weather. Some people get fed up and tie up. When they tied up, I was one. When they tied up, I went by them.
You were, to some extent, your own master.
Oh, yeah. Once the gaffer gave us an order, we was our own gaffer. But there was only one thing. He could pick us up anywhere. If he wanted us. Anywhere. I tied up one night at Long Hitchington, near Leamington Spur. I'd come all the way from London, and it was only me and the wife then. We just me and her. And we'd been podging through ice, stopping and having food. The old engine kept plonking. Having a wash, filling the engine up and having food. And sometimes when there's nothing close to us, I used to put the trailer in front of the motorboat, tied up tight. And I used to push it and steer the two. And let her do what she changed herself and do what she wanted to do. And then we'd drop it behind and away to go. I tied up at a 2-boat in it, Long Hitchington, about 8:30 to 9 o'clock at night. I said I'll put the engine right, put everything right for morning. I'll go and get some cigarettes and have a drink. I said I'll be back with you in a minute and we'll go to bed and get a couple of hours sleep. We did so. At 11 o'clock at night, on the side of the cabin, my missus said, "Jack, somebody knocking." I jumped out of bed and, "Hello, what do you want?" Put the torch on, because in them days you didn't know who was who. And I'd always got 2 guns handy. Because our gaffer said, if you've got an empty boat, seat it up. Tell nobody what you got, because there's a lot of fifth columns about. Shone the light on his face. I said, "Right, I'm head gaffer. Give me a chance to put some trousers on." Put some trousers on. I said, "What do you want?" Knock me up this time of night. He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I've tied up to have a bit of rest." I said, "I've poked through ice." I said, "I've shook the engine to pieces. I've nearly ruined it. It's leaking. I keep pumping water out of it. I've nearly drawn the beds through the bottom of the boat, the bolts." I said, and I thought I was entitled to a couple hours sleep. He said, "Get your clothes on, get yourself something to eat and refreshment, start it and bring it into Brummagem." He said, "If not, your cards will be waiting here when you get in. Your cards will be there, money and all. You can pack up and get off. Out." So I took it in. When I got in, I had to fit up to it. And he come up himself. He said, "Not to worry about that." He says, "Take it to Saltley, Doc." He said, "I'll whip it out and put you a new engine in. You can carry on again." He said, "I'll buy them engines and boats to work them. And I'll pay you to work them."
As well as long-distance carrying, there were also short-haul day jobs. Here's a boatman from Brentford who experienced both.
My dad went on the shore about 32 to 34, then we come back on to Thomas Clayton's again until 35. We come down onto the Grand Union in 35. And that's where we started when I left school, was working for Grand Unions, and then my dad left them and went on back home. And then we went local boating round Birmingham, Joey boating.
If I can ask you a little bit about the actual, well, I suppose the management of the work, really, getting the job and accounting for the loading and accounting for the arrivals and departures. How was that?
Well, that was all done through the main office, Thomas Clayton's office. They done all the dealings with getting the work, the contracts and the paying out the money and drawing the money and all that to pay the men, the captains of the boats. You didn't get no work yourself. It was always got for you.
Did that mean that you worked on a sort of ticket system?
You had your tickets to give to the canal companies to get you through. You see, the firm paid the tolls for each canal they went on. You just had a ticket and issued the ticket at the ticket office, and they give you the ticket, and then they sent the bill into the firm for I suppose it was done either the end of every month or periods of 3 months or something like that.
Here's how a Stourport boatman on the Staffs and Worcester Canal described the kind of vessel that was used for joey boating.
Well, it's a day boat for carrying coal, usually coal, it could be metal, with no living accommodation on.
Would it be specially designed as a joey boat?
Yes, very blunt ends. The rudder easily moved, and in some cases the rudder could be put on either end of the boat.
Would there be no sort of facilities at all on the boat for the crewing of it?
A little cabin on some of the boats, but some boats had no cabin, and a little stove which you could change over from boat to boat. You see, really the family boats was the long-distance boat. Of course, there's always an exception to the rule. I mean, like the gas boats, Thomas Clayton. I mean, they done a lot of short runs, and they lived on the boats.
The next speaker, the oldest witness I met in making these recordings, gave an account of the former coal and limestone business run by her parents. They had two boats at the end of the Welford Arm. That's a branch of the Leicestershire section of the Grand Union Canal, and they traded with all the villages in their area.
1891, my father came here, next door.
What would there be here, as you remember it?
Well, as I tell you, all these boats would be coming up here, and also they'd come for Western Ellis, a boat, and they'd cart from here. But these boats would come and bring coal for us as well. Well, there's always a lot of coal, and I think there was a strike in 1926, and you'd hardly believe it that our boatman said, well, I've brought many 100 tons up to this yard, but I never thought I'd ever see the day when I'd take a boatload back to Leicester. And as a child, I would see a lot of trouble because there was a weighing machine and that was the weighbridge, which is near back door now. And this way was where the horses and carts would come. There was a little bit of a pull-up to this weighing machine, and when they got on, they'd scratch, and they'd perhaps fall down, and the men would run and have to unharness the horse, to get him up.
Where does lime come into the story of the
war?
Well,
because we burnt the lime, and there's lime kilns, you see.
So the mound on the other side of the arm there, that mound covers a set of lime kilns?
That's what it was. Well, then we used to bag 20 villages.
Did your mother and father involve themselves with boats? Did they own boats at all?
Yes, the two. One, I tell you, they named Gwen Mary, and the other Julie, and from a sister, you see. Well, my father died in 1904, so my mother carried on, but she'd got good girls in the house, as I say, looked after us.
When she had to employ people on those boats, do you recall the kind of people that she was looking for? Had she got a definite idea in mind?
They were round the corner. There were 3 cottages round the corner, and that's where they lived, Jones and his 2 sons.
Coal and limestone carrying in Leicestershire. And here's an interesting reference to coal carrying in Lancashire. 50 tons at a time, if the boat was fully loaded. And the speaker recalls an interesting variation on that saying about getting a quart into a pint pot.
They tip down into a chute, and then at the bottom there's a man there with a blade. He lifted the blade up, let it come fast or slow, whichever you wanted, And if it was a bit light sometimes with your boat, you may want a bit more weight. And the one particular day I was there, and Tommy Whittle was on chute, and what do you want? It's only 43 tons. I better give me a little wagon on then. So give him a little wagon there,
You were a bit short of your 50 tons.
A bit short of getting about 50 tons, And Tommy said, we're all right here. He says, I could do you, old boatman, he said, but you're always trying to a size 10's foot and a size 8's log.
Coal, probably the most common of a wide range of commodities regularly carried on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal.
When I started on here in 1958, officially, I left at 3 o'clock, left the school at 3 o'clock, and at 4:30 I was loading 50 tonne of sugar from Tatum Houses for Leeds, with my dad, and it took us about, say an hour to load, and then my old fella'd be off on the train back home, and I'd just finish it off, put the cloths on and rope it all down and wash decks off, and by the time I got in bed, we were 8 or 9 o'clock.
Tate and Lyle's right in the middle of Liverpool.
Chisnall Street, it was, how can we say? It was a nice place, even though it looked bleak. It was nice and warm. The people down there were friendly. And the people, when they come out in the morning, the lasses, they used to load you up. They'd have a big pallets, and they used to come down about 4 or 5 staircases, on rollers, so. But by the time it got to you, we were doing about, 20, 30 mile an hour. So, being a little fella, I used to have a special platform built for me. I used to be thinking of a goalkeeper, just jump up and catch him.
There was rice, sugar, flour, oats, all sorts, peanuts, everything.
Was it different during the war years?
Oh, yes. Most of the stuff was for the army, and that went through at night, through to Liverpool from here, and then from Liverpool to France.
When it went through, did you have anything to do with it? Did you have to ticket it or gauge it or anything like that?
No, we only had to sign the permit. They brought the permit in, we signed theirs, and we signed it on our book. And we put it as something else if it was ammunition. It was secret. We're not allowed. And weren't allowed for the food, because it came from Red Cross.
Freight carrying was organised to give some boats priority for urgent deliveries, the flyboat system. Here's a Staffordshire boatman who did this kind of work.
Oh, yeah, you do. Well, I've left potteries, when we went fly, what we call fly. We got to go all night, no matter what weather it was. Really slow hill, blow hill. You'd got to keep going. You used to catch, with a little luck, you'd probably had the 6 o'clock turn at Aircastle, or the last turn. And then you got to go all the way through to Runken with your fly load. And then you'd carry on then till you got bottom lock. And then you take your notes into the office, and then they sort out what crates you wanted out for the flats. And then they take them to Liverpool.
How was the loading done?
Just depends. If some places you used to have cranes, and if there's something you could bowl on, you used to just bowl them on. Same as Tunstall Wharf. You could bowl it off their wharf and bowl it in, the same as on tubs, you could lower them down like that.
In that case, you'd have to be skillful in where you placed it, otherwise
well,
the boat's in danger.
You used to have pieces of damage, what we call damage. That was a piece of wood that would go across your boat. And either long ways or whichever road you thought that had ride. And you used to put it in whichever, for keep your boat level.
Did you ever have the business of unloading a boat just using a spade?
Oh, yeah, regularly. That's what you got to do. If you had loose stuff, flints, stone, clay, ball clay, blue clay.
A former lock keeper who used to work on dredgers at Braunston near Daventry mentioned steam-driven narrowboats on the Grand Union Canal in the 1920s. They worked round the clock and came to have a rather curious name.
Night hawkers. They used to run from Brum to London and work nights, 3 on a boat, on a steamer.
Night hawkers?
Ah, but how you spelt the hawkers, I wouldn't know. That's what I used to say, night hawker. And you could time your watch with them. They used to go through Braunston up there then, because I was dredging up there. And you could guarantee, if you got your dredger in the way, you knew they'd be coming through at a certain time. You tried to keep your dredger, because the steam dredgers was very wide. And you see, if you got into a narrow place, the boats couldn't pass you. You've got to try and scheme to get into a wide place to let the craft go by.
Night hawkers. Hawkers from Ocker Hill in Birmingham, I've been told. The next speaker saw them often enough. He saw them from the freight office in Braunston, the office of Fellows, Morton and Clayton. What did that company carry?
You used to carry anything. Soap, steel and sugar. Steam would see if they got loaded Friday. They'd be off early Saturday morning, they'd be in here Sunday night. Yeah, be ready for unloading Monday morning. Then the boats from, horse boats from Birmingham would come up and they'd unload into the steamer, see, and what they couldn't, if there wasn't enough boats there, like, we used to put it on the side, the stuff, sugar and that.
Boats carried all manner of loads. One person I spoke to referred to a load of bulldogs for Leicester. Another described the carrying of quarries by canal from Knapton Brickworks near to Rugby.
With the quarries, we'd have about 28,000, I would say. That's 14, about 21 ton. Used to be a lad in the boat, you see, and another one on the side of the canal, and just not hand them, throw them. And they used to catch them, you see, and they'd stack them like snuff. But it's surprising, get 4 good going fellas, they'd have the boat in no time.
And here's how a former tunnel keeper remembers moving house using a company boat on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal at Fullridge in the Skipton area.
They detailed the boat to stop, a transport boat, and we put furniture on that morning and took it off here afternoon.
Do you recall the occasion?
Oh, yeah.
Did you have to sheet up to protect your furniture?
No, it was a grand day. It was a grand day. It was September when we moved.
I don't expect you'd be short of space on a broad
Oh,
boat.
no, there were plenty of room, ample of room. But we hadn't much then.
Occasionally, villages and even towns could depend almost entirely upon the canal system for employment. Starport, built where the Staffs and Worcester Canal joins the River Severn, is a spectacular example. A quieter but no less striking example is the village of Shardlow on the River Trent in Derbyshire. There, raw materials arriving by canal kept many people busy, as one bankside eyewitness well recalls.
Grain, I remember maize being brought in boat loads. That had been loose and bagged off the boat. Other things were cattle cake, that would be in bags. It had been brought into Hull, transshipped in at Nottingham, and brought up from Nottingham. That was all transshipped at Nottingham.
What about coal? Did that come into the village?
Yes, coal came, but that was all brought by what they call wide boats. There was narrow boats and wide boats. The wide boats only just fitted in the lock. They can get 2 narrow boats in the lock at Shardlow, but the wide boat there's only one. And they used to bring the coal in wide boats, and that was Cowlishaw's wharf. W.J. Cowlishaw was the coal merchant, and at his wharf there was a weighbridge. It only weighed 2,500 weights at a time, I think, but it was all transshipped, taken from the wide boats into his wharf and tipped in there by Barrow, and his weight as he went. It was taken out on horse and dray. They may carry 2,500 weights at a time after it had been weighed up in 100-weight bags. And next to that was the brewery, Zachary Smith's brewery. There they made the beer, barrelled it at the brewery, and brought it up on a flat-bottom boat to the bottling stores, which is near the London Road. That was taken by boat into there and bottled in the bottling stores.
When I was coming into the village here, I noticed what appeared to be the remains of a large nursery.
Yes.
Was that at all involved with the canal? Because
yes.
It was very close.
Yes, they were carted coke. All the coke came in there, and that was carted by George and John Moore. And they ran the boats and brought the coke for Dickinson's nurseries, and the boats were drawn up on the canal side, and that was all unloaded straight into the nursery, what they called the top nursery. They'd got 2 other nurseries in the village, a middle nursery and a bottom nursery. And every day, coke was carted from the top nursery by horse and cart to the middle and bottom nurseries. And their horses and carts were stabled where you are now. And these warehouses were all built round the canal. It was the centre of everything in the village was canal life.
Taking part in this week's edition of On the Cut were Noel James, William Arthur Grimes, Jack Meredith, Alf Best, Jack Kent, Joe Safe, Philip Garrett, Gwen Gilbert, Tom Ormond, Brian Robinson, Mabel Lupton, Richard Johnson, William Green, Hubert Clark, William Taylor, Joe Robinson and John William Scott. In the next edition, the driving forces keeping boats on the move, horses and motors, are the main theme.